Welcome back, you filthy animals. I'm Hugh, you're you, and together we're going to go on an adventure. Blah, 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 rigmarole, blah, blah, blah. In my last video, I watched some videos for this game called Exodus. Um, and I decided to film a separate video for all these journal entries because they have a whole bunch of them, and it's going to take forever, like in the Sandlot, forever to read through all of them. But I told myself I would do it. I told you guys I would do it, so I'm going to do it. I just thought it should be a separate video for the people that don't want to have to listen to my horrible, obnoxious, terrible, no good voice for that long. So let's switch over to capture window. Scooby Dooby Doo. There we go. You see all these tabs? There's a story on like all of them, other to the left of that Steam icon. Those are all stories I'm about to read. So, yay. Let's get to it. Let's see if there's a video. Yep. We watched this video already, but we'll watch it one more time.
When our ancestors first domesticated animals, they had very specific purposes in mind as food sources, labor animals, or doting companions. But as our society faces the reality of a dying Earth, the role of domestic animals in our lives could be so much more. Meet Charlotte, the first of her kind, an awakened domestic pig. With our revolutionary biotech, she is an example of how we might unlock the cognitive potential of our animal companions and enhance their natural abilities. Charlotte may be the first of her kind, but she won't be the last.
No, don't want to become a founder. Okay, here we go. Exodus, Prologue, Chapter 1. That'll do. When he heard the footsteps, Torrance froze, imagining everything undone. A security detail, all riot gear and non-lethal weapons, or would they even bother to subdue him? The world was on fire, after all. Nations and corporations and individuals squabbling for every last resource. The end of days. God's new wrath against his people. And just as the first time, salvation lay within an Ark ship. But which one? Not all Arks were created equally. Sitting at the terminal, Torrance listened to the approaching steps. Their slow pace seemed to mock him. He'd shut down the most obvious applications, but anyone with training would be able to backtrack over his trail. Then he heard the breathing, and a wave of relief washed over him. The heavy panting of an overweight man, and the asthmatic wheezing of the absurd companion he'd been saddled with. It wasn't the Inquisition. The senior crew hadn't worked out what was happening. It was just the idiot night watchman making his rounds. The man put his head around the bulkhead. Brody Lucas was a slope-shouldered butt just looking for a joke to belong to. His cheeks unshaven and his hair receding. He had a wispy mustache and weak, watery eyes, and the uniform alternately stretched and creased across his body. He'd been Army once, Torrance had heard. He'd certainly let himself go, if so. I just bumped into the microphone. Sorry about that. All right there, Dr. T? Brody asked, and then his partner came shuffling around the corner like an ill-timed punchline. Doris weighed more than Brody and carried most of it around her middle. She waddled on short legs that didn't look as though they could carry all that swinging weight. She was the only member of the crew the uniform looked worse on than Brody, because in her case, they'd literally dressed up a pig. The awakened swine squinted at him, exhausted just by the effort of being there. Past Torrance's stern facade, he was delighted. It wasn't as though Brody Lucas was going to come check his comms logs or uncover his Trojan programs. Why, no, Mr. Lucas, he said. I have some heat exchange equations here that I'm having difficulty balancing. Perhaps you could pass your expert eye over them? Brody's face went to stone for 1 second before he managed a hollow chuckle. Don't reckon there's much point in that, Dr. T. You sure there ain't nothing I can get you, though? All these late shifts you could be pu- all these late shifts you keep pulling. Peace and quiet, Torrance said pointedly. He was rewarded with another glimpse of the sour man with that jovial act. How dismal it must be to know yourself useless, nothing more than the man who feeds the pig. Well, you know where we are if there's anything if and there's anything. The man shuffled out of sight. For a moment Doris stayed to peer blindly at Torrance, but then Brody's whistle called her away. Torrance bent over his terminal. He had drawn up a manifest of all the supplies that had arrived for the Tamerlane and hadn't yet been stowed. Easy enough to doctor the records, sequester off shipments of food, fuels, spare parts as though they'd never arrived. Great time for the hiccups. Then his associates would spirit everything away to the yards where the Lord Reese was docked. Because the global resources were stretched and every ARC ship was getting about half of what it needed to have the best chance at a safe journey, there were people who paid well to change that. When launch day came, Torrance would literally jump ship to the vessel his clandestine employers were stocking up. Until then, he'd put up with useless louts like Brody and Doris, the man and the pig, and in a poor light who could say which was which. He snickered meanly, then jumped when Brody's voice came from behind him again. Dr. T, sir? Terence fixed the man with the dagger stare. Do you seriously have nothing better to do? Well, Brody gave an awkward grimace. Just wondering what it was you were about, sir, seeing you so hard at it every night. Must be something powerful important. Torrance gave a theatrical look at the ship walls around them. I don't know if you've noticed, Mr. Lucas, but we are in the midst of evacuating thousands of human beings to another star. So yes, I'd say that every part of that process is powerful important, adding with a pointed look at the man, almost every part. Brody ambled closer, Doris panting and wheezing at his heels. Looks mighty complicated, he said, blinking at the screen, and of course Torrance had left nothing incriminating there. But he had a nasty moment of panic, nonetheless. What if he'd made an error, failed to cover his tracks? Except he saw the blankness of Brody's face as the man rubbed out his jowls, the poster child for ill-educated bafflement. Happy? He asked, or did you want me to take you through it from brass tacks? I'd be mighty obliged, Brody said. Terence stared at him. Does the cretin not know what sarcasm even is? Mr. Lucas, I am modeling the onboard heat exchange pathways. Uh-huh. Brody nodded. And there ain't no more to it? There's a great deal more to it, which I have neither the time nor the patience to explain to you. And what about what you was really doing? Brody asked with an ingratiating smile. What I... Torrance felt a strange chill looking into the man's sagging face. Listen here. This is above your pay grade, Mr. Lucas. Brody nodded. Sure is, Dr. T. Can't say any of them numbers mean a bean to me. Well then. Only Doris here, she tells me you're awful jumpy every time we come around. Torrance blinked at him. She tells me, Brody went on, how you sweat, how you smell scared when you hear us coming. She said just now how we should go right up over your shoulder and see how you liked it. I don't reckon you liked it. Doris? A shudder of confirmation rippled down the pig's uniformed flanks. I ain't got the first clue about what you're working on, Dr. T, but Doris sure as hell knows it ain't anything you want people finding out about, which means you ought to come up with us and talk to security while someone smarter than me goes over your work. The pig thinks, Torrance hissed. Best dog nose in the world ain't got nothing on a pig, Brody said, scratching Doris behind her ears. And pigs was smart before we made 'em smart, right? I ain't got no fancy diploma, but Doris has your number. Torrance had been inching his hand towards his pocket all through this, and now he made a final lurch, squirming out of his seat and dragging the little ceramic pistol out to shove it in Brody's face. It was a neat little toy, invisible to security scanners, and it would make a satisfying mess of that sweaty red face. In the next moment, he was on the floor beside the chair, an agony beyond all experience searing through him. He tried to pull the trigger, but the gun was gone. The hand was gone, just sheared off at the wrist. There was a terrible, ragged screaming going on, and it was coming from him. Doris, who a moment before had lunged up at him with the speed of a serpent, now chewed contentedly over a bloody lump of flesh with 5 fingers, the motion of her jaws exposing her jagged tusk. Her trotter pinned the gun demurely to the floor. "Aw, hell," Brody said mildly. "I guess we better get you up to the medics, Dr. T, and then I'll tell you what, as a special favor, I'll fetch the captain to you. Don't like don't look like you're in any state to pay him a visit anymore." Is this right? Chapter 2? Yes. Okay, Exodus chapter 2 prologue, Inheritance. Was Edith the daughter? Not Lena's daughter. Okay. "They'll have the lifts," Edith said with difficulty, "by the end of the week." She made an abortive move to help her daughter clamber off the ladder. Between Lena shrugging off her touch and her own shortness of breath, the attempt fell into the gap between them. Instead, she leaned back against the wall and took a shot from her inhaler. When she had swallowed that down, Lena was standing on the gantry, toes at the edge, looking down at the belly of the ship. Like sea monkeys dwarfed within the carcass of a whale, the vast ribs of the superstructure were still visible in places. Lit by the metallic blue of arc lights as 100 engineers, 50 awakened, and a half-thousand robots joined and sealed the bones of the northern bullet. The Ark, an Ark, one of 67 vessels currently under construction on Earth, in orbit on floating ocean dockyards, on the Moon, on Mars, wherever humans could scrape together materials and people and precious expertise. The Northern Bullet, Edith's baby, or at least the baby who didn't hate and resent her. She met Lena's gaze where the girl rocked on her heels at the very edge of the gantry. "Careful!" "Yeah, I noticed. When were they going to put in a safety rail?" "End of the week," Edith said automatically. It was a work crew joke. Everything was always end of the week. Just don't ask which week. She wanted to explain that to Lena, make her laugh at it like the crew did, at the deadlines, the hours, and the risk of injury. Because if you couldn't laugh, what could you do? This way, Edith headed off. Her ears were full of the din of industrial work below, but her feet listened for the vibration of Lena following. She pictured the girl, shoulders slouched, hands in pockets, dragged away from her friends because her mom insisted on hauling her around this corpse of a ship. Reverse corpse, she told herself, decay played backwards, disarticulated parts into a whole, life and hope for humanity's future. Up ahead, the fine detail crew were laying out the suspension racks, but that was for later. Here was curved walled alcove ahead that would be an emergency locker, but right now was just skeletal scaffolding opening onto Edith's own contribution. She snagged at Lena's sleeve. "Look," she said. Lena rolled her eyes, stood where Edith wanted in a way that made it plain it was under protest. "I wanted you to see, before they cover her, too," Edith said. "Doesn't she understand there are things I could be doing with this time, too? The entropy drive, Lena. That thing is going to get us to the stars faster than anyone would have believed possible. Faster than anything in the universe, except light. Look." Fighting down a sudden access of fury, Lena stared dully down at the vast interlocking jigsaw of ducts and chambers, rings and reactors, the impossible bringing together of different disciplines to bridge like the frozen void of space. Economic and survivable acceleration beyond the dreams of yesterday's scientists, so that what would have been 1,000 years in space might be a mere 100, a few human generations to reach the stars. I made that, Edith said, because she was so full of things she needed to communicate and that Lena just didn't want to hear. I made that, and that's why we're saved. Lena gave her a look. Wow, how long did it take you? That is my contribution, Edith insisted. 100 other minds have been working on the problem shoulders she stood on, colleagues who've paved the way. Administrators, programmers, accountants, and all those who, even now, were sealing away her pride and joy. Now I'm going to show you the suspension bays, where most of the passengers will sleep out the voyage. You made me watch all the docudramas, Mom, Lena said bitterly. People sleep, and others are crew who'll just live and die on this goddamn ship with the dogs and have kids. And those kids will get all their lives here just as some popsicle people can. Lena, listen to me. We have to finish this tour and... Tour? Lena was holding onto the bars of the alcove, staring at the engine because she plainly did not want to look at Edith. Mom, it's a construction site. Guess what? It looks just the same as it did in the docks. Hooray. People get it and go to Alpha Centauri. People get to go to Alpha Centauri because of you. That's great. I hope it's worth sidelining your family for the last 15 years. The usual surge of resentment rose in Edith and was fought down. Not as though Lena was wrong. Before peremptorily summoning the girl to her here and now, it had been almost a year since they'd been in the same room. Lena, you know, she started. Oh, go on, the girl retorted. Guilt me with it. Do I think I'm more important than the future of the whole human race? Right? I know I'm not, Mom. I'm nothing. I'm not going to invent some fantasy super engine. I'm not going to build a spaceship. I'm just going to stick around on this planet while all the bright stars of Earth go find a new home, right? Because let's face it, she added, raising her voice so that it rang down the corridor in both directions. It's not for the whole human race, is it? It's for whoever gets picked, and screw the rest of us. Because Lena was not dumb, but she wasn't smart in any of the ways that recruiters were looking for, and she knew it. Edith regarded her flatly, then pincered the girl's wrist in her hand and hauled her onwards to the long suspension bay. The first pods were already in, and the 3 women and a raccoon were overseeing the robots fitting the next batch. They've obviously heard Lena's outburst and were just as obviously saying nothing. This, Edith said, tapping on the closest pod, is... I know, Mom. Jeez. This is my pod. Lena blinked. What? Yes, right now there are global aptitude tests to see who's going to contribute most to a new extrasolar colony. Engineers, scientists, logisticians, wilderness specialists, inspirational artists, oh, and a whole lot of rich and powerful and their staff and nephews. All that. The game is rigged at every level. You don't need to be an angry teenager to see that. But everyone down there, everyone you saw working their ass off, is doing it because they get to come too. Each of us reserved a space as essential specialists. We made this ship. We go on the ship. That's our pay. You understand? Lena looked from her to the pod. So, you called me here to say goodbye? I mean, it's not like you could have just sent a message. It would have fit us better, don't you reckon? And she wasn't dissolving into tears or pleading or seeking some last-minute reconciliation. She's tough, Edith realized. Maybe that's the one thing I did give her. The one other thing. I'm old, she told Lena. I'm sick. You've seen the medical reports. What's the point of hauling this decrepit ass all the way to the Centauri cluster only to die within a few years of thawing out? But I've got this berth here, guaranteed. And so here you are, and it's yours. Ideally, it would be good for you to actually read all the tech specs I keep sending you so they can train you up more easily. Lena stared at her. You get to go to the stars, Edith said, if you want to, because you are right. I gave everything to this project and jack to anyone else, but this I can give you. I can give you tomorrow, not just the crappy today I birthed you into, and that's worth more than all the kingdoms of Earth. Okay, chapter 3. No, thank you. Exodus, Prologue, Chapter 3, 99% workable. Jurgen Barendown held off before putting in an appearance. Cognac, drugs, and a girl named Marietta ensured he wasn't idle. After which he paid her off and had security escort her off the ship. She wasn't on the guest list after all. They cheered him when he made his entrance. 39 of the most influential people in the world. Statesmen, financiers, tech moguls. Scions of billionaire dynasties whose power and wealth were as pervasive as the forces behind the weather, and amongst them Jurgen himself, whose fortune had built the greatest of arcs, the Fortunate Son, the jeweled throne from which he would steer humanity away from a dying Earth. He took a champagne glass from the robot waiter gliding past and acknowledged the handshake of a pharmaceuticals magnate. He thought of Marietta clutching her coat against the acrid rain as they hustled her out of the hatch, her account topped up with credit that was meaningless because the only worthwhile currency was being able to get off the planet. He shrugged. He had guests to greet. The music started, Elenia Mars, the diva, performing the recording of the band she hadn't been able to bring. She held out over that. Touching loyalty, really, but you had to learn to let go. She wasn't his sort of people, one of the few elevated from squalor by her gifts. And Jurgen, in his magnanimity, had saved her an invite, his good deed, and they say we only think about ourselves. She was at the very height of her talent right now. He took a moment to actually listen, rather than glad hand. Should I put her on ice for the voyage? Thaw her out when we want her? That would be kindest, surely, rather than let her grow hoarse and useless. A ping in his earpiece was from Ganelon Lu. There weren't many people outside the hull module Jurgen would take time for, but the Sun's captain certainly qualified. Go ahead, he invited. Mr. Barendown, sir, came Lu's calm voice. We are ready to start the launch clock at your order. Go ahead, Jurgen confirmed. He spread his arms and let the room's sound system pick up his voice as though he was standing at the shoulder of every guest. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, if I can direct you to the big screen. One wall of the module opened a view of the sun from the outside, sitting in its launch cradle. Feeling an acute sense of history in the making, Jurgen reached out and touched the wall of the module, trying to feel a connection all the way to the outer hull and to the display. From the outside, the Great Arc was purely a functional thing. Here, in the executive module, all was gilt and finery, the excess of past centuries preserved for humanity's future. Elsewhere in the module, he had a pool, grand bedrooms fully stocked with toys, and even a golf course, or at least a chamber that could be reconfigured into 18 different holes for a game. Not quite ideal, but one had to make a few sacrifices. The numbers on the clock counted down, ticking past the 20-minute mark. Jurgen went to greet more friends. Elenia Mars had finished her set and gone to get changed. He sent her a message requesting the pleasure of her company. He'd have her on his arm when the engines fired. And they left the dying rock of the world behind him. She'd be properly grateful later, no doubt. He worked hard to make this happen, or at least he'd worked his people hard. 5 minutes to midnight, and suddenly the bleeding hearts had come out of the woodwork. How can we save the most people? What about this culture? Or that language? Or that demographic? Who cares? Had been his response. What a time for people to grow a conscience. Here in the executive module, he was preserving something more valuable than just more people. He was preserving 40 of the greatest dynasties of Earth, the people who had shaped the destiny of the planet. He was preserving a library of music and literature and culture. He had original artwork, sculptures, portraits, famous jewels, and dinosaur skeletons. He had Earth, here. Earth, minus all the misery they were leaving behind. He was going to take perfection to the stars. Melania hadn't shown yet, and the ship couldn't locate her. That meant that one of his peers had already claimed the diva for her first dance, given each of them had insisted on rights of privacy. Vexing. Jurgen decided he would have to establish a proper pecking order once they'd taken off, and the timer was just past 5 minutes, counting down. Jurgen's annoyance was washed away in an almost boyish sense of enthusiasm. The crowd ebbed aside to give him pride of place as they gathered to watch the screen. The Fortunate Son lay on its belly on the platform. The four thruster pontoons were pivoting their jets downwards. The ascent to orbit would be no roaring rocket thrust, but a controlled ascent, science conquering Earth's hungry gravity. Then, out of atmosphere, the real engines would trigger, and the sun would begin its great voyage in earnest. A ping in his ear. "Mr. Barrendown, sir, all systems remain green," came Lou's voice. "Launch protocols are locked. Would your guests appreciate a view of the control center as an inset, sir, in case they wanted to see the heart of things?" As far as Jurgen was concerned, he was the heart of things, but some of his fellows might be interested, so he gave his assent. Into the corner of the big screen popped a window displaying the cramped confines of the vessel's cockpit. Lou and his underlings were there, overseeing the vast host of automated system. He piloted another glass from one of the waiters, finding it barely chilled. He looked around for one of the human staff, but only the robots were visible. Another little hitch to what should have been a perfect moment. "Isn't that the singing girl?" Someone jogged his elbow, spilling a dash of champagne. Jurgen frowned at the woman at Lou's right shoulder. It did look damnably like Alania if she traded her ball gown for a flight suit. And that woman at the other elbow looked like Marietta. He pinged the captain, feeling a curious uncertainty for perhaps the first time in his life. "One moment, sir. Apologies." On screen, the thrusters fired, momentarily washing the whole screen in white glare. Around Jurgen, his fellow magnates cheered and whooped. The vast bulk of the ship shuddered and began to ascend. "Isn't it amazing?" someone slurred. "How you can barely even feel it in here?" Jurgen stared at the screen, experiencing a curious visual hallucination. The sun was lifting off. At the same time, it was staying put. The central belly of the ship was sitting on the platform even as the superstructure, crew spaces, and engines were flying away. "Captain Lou," Jurgen hissed. The crushing hand that he felt around his heart was nothing to do with the forces of liftoff. "I'm afraid," Lou answered politely. "I will shortly be engaged in docking with our orbital module and won't be able to attend further communications." "What orbital module?" "The habitat module, living space for 3,960 people. Almost 100 people for every one at your party. It's remarkable how efficient one can be when one really considers how best to use the space." On the screen, the sun was out of shot, leaving only the great grounded box of the executive module. Jurgen suddenly found himself sitting down, trying hard to breathe against the tightening clints in his chest. "On behalf of the crew and the passengers of the Fortunate Son, I wish you a very long life," Lou said pleasantly. "Enjoy Earth, sir." Around Jurgen, as realization sunk in, the party began to die. Whew, I am hot in this mask, I tell you. Exodus Game Prologue, Chapter 4, Spares. "The allocator," Kendall announced, "is fused." "That's what I said," came Mabel Seven's voice from the radio currently hung around her neck. He wasn't currently jockeying a camera drone through the next unit along, which was connected to the 3D printer banks below. Either that or life support, and they should probably double check before switching anything off. "The allocator?" She pulled up the schematics on her portable display. "What's it allocating?" Not for the first time, the blueprints for the Ark Abandoned Bride failed to match what she actually found behind the panels. The work crews had been short of materials, and there had been a lot of workarounds back in the day. That day was a century ago, and there weren't many people left whom a third-generation engineer like Kendall could ask. Maybe not anything. However, it's integral to the digital architecture. Screwed allocator equals screwed entire system. So, you need to either rejig all the pathways to skip it, or you flag something on her screen. "Replacement allocator, here." "What's that one allocating?" Nutrient flows to cryopods 251 through 273, Nabel 7 reported, which we don't need after last time. Last time. Yeah. They got 7 people out alive by but the contents of pods 251 to 266 had already spoiled, was Nabel 7's word for it. After that, they linked pods 265 to 273 to the neighboring bank, so any systems linked to the failed pods were fair game. I'll make the swap, she told Nabel 7. She replaced the fused allocator with the perfectly serviceable allocator from the dead cryopods so that it could continue to do absolutely nothing, but in a way that restored functionality to a wider system. What's next on the docket? Cryopods 407 to 463 check systems. We've been noticing power fluctuations. We just did those. We did not, Nabel 7 said. We did them. 8 years ago, under my predecessor. Kendall stared at the open panel for a moment, her hands on automatic as they freed the allocator from its housing. 3 years? And they shouldn't need to check each system even every 8 years. The idea was that engineers would be woken every decade or so to check the most problematic systems, not this rolling carnival of patch jobs. When was I last on ice? 29 years, Nabel 7 informed her because he didn't understand rhetorical questions. Related, as a break from your maintenance schedule, you should join me in the medical bay after attending to the cryopods. You're overdue for your checkup. I'm fine. The allocator came free with a strained wrench. She started prying at the neighboring panel, wondering if she should just start leaving the things off, because there'd always be a next time. She didn't feel fine. She was constantly tired, with stomach cramps and pain in her hands from repetitive strain. Her hip ached and her eyes weren't good. But then she was still technically Kindle the first, so she was way up on Nabel 7. Examining the pods, he added 19 jobs to Kindle's to-do list. She'd stood and looked through the frosted plastic at all those tranquil faces, one after another, sleeping the sleep of oblivion, ready to wake up and step off the boat on some idyllic new world. Not a thought spared for the poor mooks who'd kept them alive through the decades in space. And now here she was, having her vital signs checked out by an octopus. That's funny. Nabel 7, shouldn't he be Nabel 8? Hung in a water-filled tube, part of a network that extended through the ship, giving them access to regions that human crews simply couldn't get eyes on. For everything else, Nabel 7 could handle remote repair drones as though they were just extra limbed. The main drawback at that moment was lifespan. When they'd first thawed Kendall out, she'd been working with Nabel 4. Well, Doc, give me the bad news. Imminent pancreatic failure, came the voice from the radio, a translation of the manual input the creature's tentacles were typing in. She laughed, waited for the punchline, but there wasn't one. Wait, no. I mean, I told you about the hip and the hands. You want to focus on those or the pancreas? Naval asked. I have begun the procedure for a surgeon, but your replacement needs to be activated, and I don't have authority for that. I can't just be replaced, Kendall said. I've got decades left. I'm, what, not young, not ready to cash out, though. I haven't got time to train someone up. You know what it's like out there? Nothing matches the plans. She jabbed a finger at her head. In here is how the ship works. I could spend 5 years writing it down and not scratch the surface. Lived experience, Nabel. I can't just decant that into some spotty adolescent and say, off you go. They wouldn't know what to do the next time something went wrong. Nabel 7 watched her for a while and then very deliberately bunched and spread his many arms, a very human shrug from an utterly inhuman body. Time out. These ascended octopi make me think of the Hanar from Mass Effect. Time in. The surgeon had been, well, he'd been horrified to discover how the bride was running. And then all over again when he appreciated just how much the ship was depending on a handful of engineers like Kendall. Right now, he was trying to get the medical printer to create a biocompatible pancreas for transplant. The problem being that system hadn't worked properly for 5 decades, and nothing it turned out was even close to the right shape. So she'd taken a break from all the emergency jobs to scavenge parts to fix the medical printer. She'd have to hope nothing she was pulling bits from would be at the top of tomorrow's work queue. It's all falling apart, she told Nabel 7 over the radio. We're all falling apart. Well, keep it all together, the octopus replied after a pause. How'd you reckon? Well, I looked for any other option and I couldn't see one, or so I guess we do that. She couldn't tell if he was joking or being absolutely literal and serious. After fixing up the medical printer, she left the doctor working with it and called up the bride's manifest, playing with search terms, with her own medical records open on the other screen, thinking about how there was only so long you could go on when she started robbing Peter to pay Paul. Across the room, the doctor started swearing. The medical printer diagnostics were all this side of green, but it was turning out sludge rather than replacement organs. It was a problem for the failing organ Kendall had inside of her. One more search, a list of positive results. Hey, Doc. Doctor looked up, his young face taut with frustration, an expression that was, to Kendall, like looking in a mirror. Get everything prepped, Doc. Let Nabel handle the automatic surgical system. He's good with remotes. Get it all sterile and ready. I'll be right back. She thought he guessed then, tested the predicament against his medical oaths, and felt the ladder bend. He nodded. Soon after that, she was standing before Cryopod 419. Inside was a statistician named Eleni Hegg. She was 28, an amateur runner, a published poet. There had been a little video clip of her being very excited about applying for a berth on the bride. She was also in possession of a very healthy pancreas that was a perfect match for Kendall, and Pod 419 was on the amber list. It could fail any day. Kendall thought about her own pancreas, likewise ready to fail any day. She thought of the vast list of repair jobs she had to do and how long it would take to train up any apprentice to where they could navigate the creaky old Ark's eccentric system. The doctor is ready, Abel Seven told her. Eleni Hegg's impassive face swam before Kendall's eyes. She opened the panel beside the pod and fished out her tools. I'm on my way, she said. I am thirsty.
The Colonel says the future of humanity lies somewhere among the stars. He says nothing is as important as finding new planets to call home. And I believe him. Alien worlds found to be habitable are the new frontier for humanity. As the ancestors once said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But most are uninhabitable, or worse, deadly. Their atmospheres and ecologies more trouble than they're worth. Others, perhaps viable in theory, prove nothing more than desolate, hopeless wastelands. Some are even hostile. In fact, it often goes that the more beautiful the planet, the more sinister the threats it holds. The few that show fertile promise are made ready for terraforming, and their locations transmitted to the rest of the fleet. Since contact with the other arcs has gone cold, the Colonel insists the Hammercross set up a station here, on Emerald. He couldn't have known the planet would be toxic. Could he?
Okay. Exodus game, prologue, chapter 5, Green Worlds. Oh, this is a longie. Okay. After 10 minutes of pitch darkness, amber emergency lighting glowed into sullen life. Internal comms were dead too. It's been a trek through the Hammercross's cluttered living space so he could complain to admin, or at least explain why he wasn't getting his assigned tasks done. The trip gave him plenty more to worry about. The main corridor, once a gleaming wonder of polished metal and information screens, was a slum now. All the walls had been opened up. Some of them were active repair sites, oil-stained canvas crews squirreling into the Ark's inner world to repair vital system or salvage for parts. Elsewhere, gaps were covered over with cloth, awnings, and families lived in cramped spaces behind. No matter how many people the colonel, no matter how many people the colonel shipped down to the world below, there were always too many scraping and living in the Hammercross's deteriorating spaces. At the admin office, there was a long queue of people with similar complaints. Every non-vital system and area in the ship was experiencing rolling blackouts, and sometimes worse. The colonel's militia were going down the line, questioning, sending people on their way, filtering the line down to something manageable, the important people with important problems. Evan reckoned he didn't fall into that category, but he braced himself to stand his ground. Long-range comms, he told him. I need dedicated power. The soldiers in uniforms and body armor looked at him unsympathetically. So does everyone else. No, listen, I'm crew, jabbing a finger at his insignia and trying to hide the blue flash that said he was only an apprentice. I get twice as many failures as anyone else. I haven't been able to scan for signals for weeks now, ever since old Hargreen had been taken away, leaving Evan with no mentor to teach him the job he couldn't do anyway. Pet hair gets everywhere somehow. Long-range comms? One of them asked. Don't sound urgent to me. What were you going to hear? I have a job, Evan insisted. What am I supposed to do? You could always volunteer on planet, one of them said. Plenty of jobs down there. Evan retreated to the cramped cubbyhole that served as his living space, no more than a bunk set into a maintenance dunk and curtained off for minimal privacy. There was no light there either, but that didn't impair the militia when they came with their torches and hauled him off to speak to Captain Fusca. Fusca was one of the colonel's direct underlings, meaning someone Evan had no wish to ever have dealings with. She was a lean, compact woman with a ragged scar across the line of her jaw. She'd got it, Evan had heard, when the colonel had taken over from the chaotic infighting of the old command crew. Now she had him sitting in front of her desk as she worked the reports, kept him fidgeting, just so he understood the balance of power between them, as though sending soldiers to fetch him didn't make that plain enough. Needless to say, her work area had ample power. I understand you were kicking up a fuss today at the office, Apprentice Evan, she noted. I just want to do my job, he said. I've seen the latest proclamations. As of tomorrow, you'll be glad to hear that you don't need your job. Long-range comms is finally being discontinued. We can't spare the space or the power. But, although he'd been expecting as much, Lieutenant, isn't this whole universe out there? What if someone's out there trying to tell us something? What if indeed? She smiled crisply. You ever wanted to go on planet, Evan? He froze. The answer was no. Nobody wanted to, though lots of people went. Those the colonel decided were a problem. Fusca smiled and stood abruptly. Let's go. I've got a shuttle waiting just for me and you. Consider yourself privileged. The regular worker transport are standing room only. They called the world Emerald, not poetic, merely descriptive. The greenest of green worlds, a world of life, carbon-based life whose evolution had converged on Earth-style photosynthetic pathways. The green world of shallow seas and continents awash in ankle-deep water. A slick coating of algae from pole to pole, gradients of unique species adapted to different latitudes, indistinguishable to the human eye. All of it the same odd color of vibrant green. Life in the outer stars, life and even oxygen. A habitable world after the half-dozen dead rocks the Hammercross had discovered. Except it wasn't. Except that green held a terrible secret. Why else were all the workers down here at the farm camp wearing respirators? Why did they look so sickly? Some of that green was not the local chlorophyll variant. It was the variety of cyanide compounds. Emerald's biochemistry was suffused with it, at levels lethal to Earth life. The farm camp was trying to find a way to extract anything usable from the local flora, and thus far all it had done was kill a whole lot of people that the colonel wanted dead. A service, but not one that went towards building much of a future. Fusca strode through the camp, fully suited up to protect her from the poison-infused air. Evan, with just a mask and gloves, stumbled after her. They were headed to a long, low, prefabricated shack labeled as the infirmary. Unsurprisingly, every bed was full, and half the floor was pallets. Dying workers shuddering out their last hours before seizures or cardiac arrests took them, and in the far corner, on no more than a blanket, was Hargerin, Evan's former boss. The old man was in a bad way. He'd never been strong, even up on the Ark. He was alert, though. His eyes glittered as he saw Fusca and Evan pick their way over to him. "You won't talk to me," Fusca said flatly. "Talk to him. Tell him what got you sent down here," with the unspoken threat in her voice, "or the kid gets it." "Lackey," Hargreen spat at her. "Bootlicker." "Speak," Fusca insisted. "What did you find, old man?" Hargreen looked at Evan. "I'm sorry, boy. I didn't want you to die down here, too." "Sir, what is it?" "They'll kill you if you know." Evan gestured around them. He was here now anyway. How much worse could it get? Hargreen sighed. "There is a signal from another arc, from light years away. Green worlds, it said. Living worlds. Enough room for everyone. A new home for humanity. Everyone welcome." "But that's wonderful," Evan exclaimed, except Hargreen was down here too, so apparently it wasn't. "I took it to the colonel," the old man said. "I was practically dancing all the way to his office. We were saved, except he didn't want to hear it. He has control here. He has order. To move the art, that needs crew. That means change, doing things differently. It means him sharing what's his, and so he sent me down here and made sure long-range comms were never up long enough to find that signal again," said Evan. "And so you know," Hargreen fixed Fusca with a sharp gaze, "you happy in that knowledge, Captain? Because your commanding officer would rather condemn us all to a slow death on this poisoned planet than go find the real green worlds that are out there. He'd rather be a king of a pile of corpses. So what are you going to do? You going to keep taking his crumbs and his orders? Have you got the spine to mutiny that so that someone out of this sorry mess has a tomorrow to look forward to?" Time out. That reminds me of, um, gosh, what's his name? The companion in Mass Effect 2, is it Jacob? His dad crashed a ship and he turned everyone into like mindless zombie slaves. Okay, I'm in.
Do you know what fear is?
Yes, Maddie.
The Mariama do. They thrive on it. These monstrous celestials haunt the darkest corners of the cluster, hunting for isolated targets. And, unfortunately for their victims, the Mariama are interested in more than just stealing cargo. They want minds, memories, emotions. The more twisted and tortured, the better. Captured prey will be subjected to intense psychological torment before being neurologically drained. Those rare few the Mariama allowed to survive and escape often never return to space, for they know too well the terror that lurks out there, in the dark, between the stars. I am CC Orlev.
Okay, Exodus game, prologue, chapter 6, the Mariama. Oh, wait. Did he just read all this so I don't have to read it? Because that'd be pretty sweet. Yes. Yes, my throat can get a break. Yes. And this one doesn't have a video. Okay, so now we're at Exodus Game, Prologue, Chapter 7. Just at the edge of hearing. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. That was super professional of me, huh? I have dog hair, like all up in my mask, and it is just so hard to put into words how itchy and irritating it is, especially when you're trying to read something. Okay, just at the edge of hearing. Not all ARC ships arrived in Centauri at the same time, my child, nor did they all have the same success starting a settlement. Those who arrived first, those who evolved into what we know now call Celestials. Oh, that's an interesting twist. Were not always the most gracious of hosts. Sometimes they tolerated the humans who came centuries or millennia later. Often they enslaved or exploited us. Other times they ignored us, and on very rare occasions they even seemed to help us. But though we share a common origin, the Celestials have evolved into something post-human, inhuman. They are not allies. They are not our friends. The best policy is to simply avoid them as much as possible. Settle on worlds the Celestials have abandoned or ignored, planets where fledgling human colonies might be able to thrive and flourish on our own merit. Yet one can't help but wonder, on discovering one of these rare unclaimed worlds, why is it still empty? I see what's wrong with it, Ollie said, but I don't see what's wrong with it. Stephen gave him an odd look. Say what? I mean, it's something scrambled in the nuclei of some of the cells. I'd say at random, but it's like a pattern. I don't see it. I just see a photo, Stephen said, which means this is ag size problem and not gene tech. Well, the potatoes genes. You know how easy ag sci have it on this planet? Stephen was getting into his stride. I mean, okay, no oxygen yet. Another 5 generations before our little extremophile bugs put out enough for you to plant your potatoes outside. But 8/10 of Earth's gravity, temperatures like a sunny day in Nebraska, big flat plains, Ollie. Big flat plains of dust so chock full of hydrocarbons it's positively soil without the gribblies that that'll eat your potatoes. Just enclose a dome and pump some air into it. Alien Mother Nature's already done the hard work. And you know what? They even break the potatoes, and somehow it's our problem then. Just all broken inside, Ollie said, wonderingly, looking into the next micrograph of jumbled base pairs, and theoretically in that mess was a genetic code that would grow you a potato, but nobody was putting that jigsaw together. You hear the news from the teratology ward? A lot of people seen developing tomas. Potatoes! Stephen shouted. I mean, damn me! Those are the quintessential space food, aren't they? Even some clown that got himself marooned can grow potatoes. You saw that old movie, Ollie, where the spaceman grows potatoes? What was it? Space Tato? Space Tato, that's the one. And here we are with the best planetary cards anyone could ever deal us, and our dumbass ag side boys can't even. Ollie wasn't listening anymore. Each new image seemed to be boring into his mind. There was more than a pattern in the distribution of damaged potato cells. There was a message. He'd heard it before, just as he fell asleep, a voice at the edge of hearing, whispering, terrible things, incredible things. Stephen, he said, feeling his teeth vibrate, do you hear that? Stephen was still ranting about the inadequacy of potato farmers. Ollie made a sound. It was supposed to be a word, but it came out as a guttural buzzing deep in his chest. Say what? Stephen asked, broken from his tirade. Ollie, you just hocked a... Damn me, that looks like half a lung. Ollie turned toward him, feeling blood all over his chin and strung between his teeth. Ollie, here. And he heard, and he needed to make sure Stephen heard, but the sound wouldn't go in Stephen's ears properly, so he had to make some other entry for it, to let it into the man's skull. He lunged, feeling his colleague's throat under his fingers, jaws gaping so he could worry away Stephen's flesh. Gross. The recording was shocking enough to silence the room. A man turning on his neighbor and savaging him, gone completely cannibalistically insane without warning, or apparently without warning. The autopsy of both men, because Ollie had torn Stephen's throat out before anyone could intervene, had shown the fingerprints of the true killer. Alina Vale, chief medic, began sliding her findings onto the screens of the assembled ARC and civilian leadership. I'm so thirsty. A catastrophic breakdown of intracellular structure spread out across the body, she explained. We've seen similar signs before at early stages. Mr. Ollie had several symptoms he wanted checked out, but the damage had voided his major organs, and so he is too far down the list. We never got to him before it got to his brain. In what? Someone demanded. There's nothing alive out there, even at the microscopic level, and we've taken the utmost quarantine precautions anyway. Everything's screened, irradiated, scanned, sieved. How can there be an it? How do you cure it? Someone else shouted over them. Dr. Vale just stood there, fiddling with her own screen, mouth twitching. Doctor, the ARC captain prompted her, if it's a biological agent that's somehow interacting with our biology, then what have we missed? How do we screen it out? It isn't a biological agent, Vale said briskly. In fact, we took far too long to work out what it was, because that's what we were looking for, because we were seeing these low-level symptoms killing the crops, making us sick, and now this. It was what Ollie said that finally put me on the right track. You can just catch it, under Stephen's rambling. Do you hear that? He says. And naturally, we looked at his ears and there's no infection. The damage barely touches there. But one of the geophysics team was complaining about auditory hallucinations, like a buzz all the time, a kind of vibrational tinnitus. We told him it was nothing. He didn't believe us. He repurposed a chunk of the earthquake kick, and he was right. It wasn't nothing. He's in the ward with acute liver failure right now, but we have his results. It's some silicate, some geological microstructure, someone interrupted her. Surely there's nothing so small getting past our filters. Not that, she said patiently. It's the planet, not a small thing at all, a very big thing. The planet, the captain echoed scornfully, is making people sick. The planet, she confirmed, is killing us and our crops with its song. There, at least, was enough to shut down the chatter the first time since they'd seen Ollie's rampage. Let me ask you something, she said. Have any of you heard a sound right at the very edge of your ear, when it's quiet, at night, when you're on your own and realize it's always there? Just so soft that most of the time it's drowned out. Hold on. And we're back. Dog break numero dos over. Sorry for any repeating, but I can't start in the middle. My brain just won't work that way. Let me ask you something, she said. Have you heard a sound right at the very edge of your ear when it's quiet at night, when you're on your own, and you realize it's always there, just so soft that most of the time it's drowned out? A whistle, or a hum, or a buzzing. I have. And she saw the faces flinch and the ones that didn't, and nobody admitted to anything. You're keeping quiet because you don't want to admit to being sick, then you should know that hearing the sound just means your ears are better for certain frequencies. Everyone's body is being affected by it. Every living thing we grow here. Every human being. Isn't it an attack? Someone wanted to know. Not even that, she said, because at least an attack would be comprehensible. Something on the human scale. It's the planet, she said helplessly. Deep geological movement of tectonic plates creating a constant harmonic vibration entirely alien to anything we have encountered on Earth. It shakes apart our cells from the nucleus out. The patterns Ollie observed reflect the waveforms of the sound. It's in all of us. We're all sick with it. How do we keep it out? The captain demanded. We can't, she said. It's not a germ or a toxin or even radiation. It's a vibration, and it runs through the entire planet. And that means even though so many other constants are in our favor, we must leave. It's a death world, and if we stay, it's going to sing us all to death. Time out. The song makes me think of Mass Effect and the Rachni. There's something else that reminded me of something in here. No, I can't remember. Time in. Let's go to chapter 8. These guys look like Solarians crossed with, not Borg, what are they called? I'm recording, aren't I? Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Geth. Solarians crossed with Geth. Dig deep. Oh, sorry. Exodus Prologue, Chapter 8, Dig Deep. Across the vast Centauri cluster, ancient ruins lie beneath hidden rocks and debris, buried remnants of those who came before us, an endless cycle of civilizations, human and celestial, rising to glory, then crumbling into dust. Worlds abandoned and forgotten until a new generation arrives to put on what was left behind, layer upon layer upon layer. For the Ark ships arriving now, those left wandering the blackness of space for millennia, these ruins offer hope. Scouring these empty worlds, we find scattered remnants of advanced technology we can use to jumpstart our understanding, giving us a foundation upon which to stand. In the bones left behind, we can find a skeleton we can build on. But not all ruins are benign. Some conceal far more than crumbling stone and discarded machines. Following the path of those who came before us, we hope it will not lead to our own collapse and despair. Digging down, down, down through the depths, will we discover the secrets of our long-term survival or unearth unimaginable horrors that should have remained buried? This mask is so itchy. It's a wasteland. Even in his armored encountered suit, Brian hunched against the wind and rain. Around them was a crazed mosaic of blocks and gullies, perilously slanted slabs of stone. It's a ruin, Reese corrected. The difference? Someone lived here. We could too, she pointed out. Yeah? Power readings, remember? Reese reminded him. Someone left lights on. Or the reactor in meltdown, Brian grumbled. They chose this route carefully, scaling slopes and grappling down drops. The entire world was like this, ruin interlocking with ruin. Dead now, but these were the ashes of a civilization that had lasted for centuries. Its end had been sudden and catastrophic. They'd bombed themselves into oblivion, or someone had come from outside to do it. A global nuclear bombardment so long ago that time and half-lives had erased even that. They found a way down soon after, attaching lines and lowering themselves carefully into a low space of columns and empty-socketed buildings. Whoever lived here had loved tiny windows too high for a regular human to look through and hated straight lines, and died, Reese understood, and had not, despite the power readings, left any lights on. Their suit lamps scrubbed at the gloom in every direction, finding only more of the same. Street after curving street, little windows up close to the low ceiling. Art, occasionally. Faded metallic doors shimmering back a gleam of blue-gray or orange. One concave wall held a complex design of circles and connecting lines. Abstract painting or map of the city center. We can live underground, she said, like these people did, once we find out how they did it. They didn't, Byron said flatly. What? Whoever built this, they were different from the people up top. Those were all big flat slabs. This is all circles. This was the surface. Whoever came later paved over and forgot them. The thought made her shiver. The ruins above were over 1,000 years old and dead. How long had they lived before the end? And how long had this deeper layer of habitation lain untenanted before those other unknown people had come to settle here? Soon after, they found the surface dwellers had not forgotten their buried predecessors. Instead, when their own world had been under the hammer, they had dug down. There were signs of a makeshift settlement, of re-edification of the curved-walled spaces. Refugees from above had come here and... what? There was not enough trace of them to suggest they stayed around for long. They died, Brian pronounced flatly. The whole surface got lit up with broken atoms, Reese. Probably they were already sick with it when they came. There's enough rock above to shield them. I want to find out where they went. Power signatures, right? You think they might still be alive down there? Maybe. Brian shook his helmeted head. What'll that look like? We uncover a civilization of blind cannibals? It's on you. If you're this damn pessimistic, you should have stayed on Earth, she said. I was born on ship, he pointed out. Not everyone's got to sleep all the way. And there was more to that rant, the division between loafers and lifers, as they were called. But it would have to wait, because they'd found a hatch. Black metal set into the floor, untouched by corrosion, indented with weird, eye-leading patterns 4 meters across, octagonal, utterly out of scale and style with anything around them. For a moment, they just looked at it. Then Brian started to speak, and she raised a gauntleted hand to silence him. But, Brian, you are going to say this is how bad thing. You're going to say this has bad things behind it, and I do not want to hear that. It leads down. The powered sections, working technology, cheery robots telling our wish is their command, and then murdering us. Brian, will you just help me get this open? If it had not been for the others before them, they would not have been able to. Someone with a better understanding of technology had already been there. They found open panels and exposed wiring with a little power borrowed from their suits. The vast hatch separated into triangular sections and swung silently open. Reese inched to the edge and looked down. They left the lights on, she breathed. Her voice shook. The scattering of green-white illumination was a long way down. The space the hatch opened onto was cavernous, a world beneath the world. The metal flank of some vast machine extended away into the dark. The long, rippled trails that streaked to its sides were stone, deposited by thousands of years of dripping water. Yet the lights were still on. She could hear deep and distant thunder, barely more than a vibration, that spoke of cyclopean engines still active in defiance of entropy. They let themselves down into the abyss. The pallid lamps hung in the air around them like a sick constellation, suspended by fragile gossamer traces. Brian reached out to one, and a half-seen thread shaved off the tip of a glove, an infinitely keen line. On the ground at last, the time-worn flanks of stilled machines rose on all sides. Not a city, but some unthinkably huge factory floor or industrial zone. Even as they caught their breath, I wish I could catch my breath, they heard metal on metal, the approach of some Denzian. Ducking under the housing of the nearest dead engine, they waited. What passed them was a skeletal framework made of metal that walked like a man, trailing a litter of broken wires and ducting. As it passed into the gleam of a hanging lamp, they saw its plastic-looking innards writhe as though the light fed them. Ancient repair mechanisms knitted together cords and components that were unspooling again a moment later, over and over. Repair and decay in an endless cycle. And then it was lost to the dark, only the receding clock of its step vouching for it. That's a problem, Brian said. An opportunity, Reese corrected him. Salvageable technology. We can learn from it. Desperately clutching for the positive, they pressed on. Ugh. So hot in this mask. They pressed on, feet cracking the thin skin of waterborne stone that had coated the floor, searching for signs for the refugees' progress. Ahead, a great irregular panel had been pried from one of the engines, and they quickened their pace. There was light inside, a bluish radiance different to the hanging lanterns. She was so eager to see what was there, she almost fell into it. There was no floor, just a sheer descent to a lower level. Brian grabbed her belt, and she tipped forwards, and for a moment she hung there, looking down, understanding. When he dragged her back, she stood for a moment, catching her breath, ordering her thoughts. You were right, she said. This is no place for us. We need to move on. There will be better worlds. If he was surprised, he said nothing of it, just nodded. They made their way back to their rope in silence. She'd looked down and seen them, the Denzians of this dead place. She couldn't even say if they were the builders of these engines or the curved homes above or refugees from the surface. There had been hundreds of them. Time and running water had layered them with the skin of stone, erasing features, fixing them forever in the attitude they died in, crouched in a great mass, arms extended to ward off whatever unthinkable force had snuffed out their lives, spines arched, heads thrown back. Human enough for her to read the horrors of their final moments. Whatever had wrecked their world had not spared them. And past them, through the gaps in the floor, a deeper level, but red with other lamps, girders and holes and slow-turning wheels, and past that, at the very edge of sight, a chasm scattered with needle points of light. And doubtless there were more, deeper in, worlds of the dead, all the way down. She would report that to the Ark. Not a world to settle or even scavenge, not a world to live on, only a place to die. Okay. Exodus Game, Chapter 9, Prologue, Controlling Interest. As travelers returning home stirs trepidation and uncertainty, as sharp as the moment we first embarked on our exodus, we carry the quiet ache of knowing that while we were lost in time, the world moved on without us. Weeks and years may have passed for us, yet decades slipped by for those we left behind. Lives changed, memories dimmed, bonds unraveled, leaving us adrift, disconnected from the people and places we once called home. But home is different. We wonder, will anyone grasp the cost of what we've endured? In the eyes of those we love, we see doubt, fear, and distrust after our long absence. But even as we hold them close, offering thanks and breaking bread, our thoughts drift back to the stars, to the battles fought and those still to come, to the fragile promise of a tomorrow they may never see. Though our missions take us far from home, the homecoming is always a time well spent. This looks like a lot from Mass Effect 1. Okay. The statue, Jonah said, is a little much. Well, yes, Iris admitted. I can see that coming back to find a statue of yourself behind the docking field might raise some eyebrows. I mean, literally, it's 10 meters tall. We need a statement, a hero figure. Iris ducked into the relative cool of the port buildings. People were staring, pointing, his face recognizable from the great limestone sculpture outside, stern, determined, and noble. Jonah didn't feel that he was any of those things, just as he wasn't 10 meters tall. People were gasping and staring, though. An old man dropped to his knees. A woman reached to touch the hem of his threadbare coat. Iris got him to a booth in the port lounge, and a couple of uniformed men made sure they had their privacy. The interiors Jonas saw looked smarter than they had been when he left, just like the clothes of the people here. A definite hike in manufacturing and overall wealth, and evenly spread, too. The staff at the port seemed well fed and in good spirits. People invested in their work and not just clinging on because of starvation was snapping at their heels. It had been rough when he left, but he'd worried that the family was going to just hoard its wealth and turn its back on the world. Whatever stewards had been in charge had obviously been working on infrastructure and general quality of life. I can't help noticing our little lizard badges on all the staff around here, and all the posters, too. We took over the port. Iris flashed a smile at the dog that ambled up with a tray of drinks to its back. Tray of drinks on its back. Thank you, Masri. Well, basically there was a crooked cartel running the joint back about, 20 years ago. And there were pirates in the outer system, too. They were killing off the shipping trade because they couldn't keep their greed in check. So we had to step in. Why us? Jonah asked. What were they called? Cicatrice Corporation? Old Van Cell's lot? This was their stopping ground back when I left. Iris rolled her eyes. Them? Will you remember the pirates and crooks I just mentioned? Seriously? She shrugged. Change of management, short-term profiteering, the usual. Jonah spared a thought for Pa Vincel. Not exactly a good man, but someone who knew the value of order. Not so his heirs, apparently. It got messy, Iris went on. There was a war, basically. Us and those we could motivate against Cicatrice and their brigands. I understand it was bad, which is why Uncle Mateus reckoned we needed a figurehead. Hence that great big you out there. The promise of the future. The man who was coming home with the goods. And I've seen your cargo manifest. If even half of that stuff checks out, it's a whole leap forward for our manufacturing and weather control satellites. What's that face for? I just realized Uncle Mateus is a little Matty. He was half your age when I left, running around wearing his dad's old space helmet. He's still around? She shrugged. He took off after he got things stable, handed things over to cousin Elisha. He always did say he wanted to go traveling, Jonah recalled, bittersweet. In his head was the child of then. In Iris's head was a man past Mill's years, clutching for the last coattails of his dreams. And where was Maddie now? Would he and Jonah ever coincide, or would they keep missing each other until one of them never came home, or used up their personal stock of years? What are today's bugbears? He asked her, then had to clarify what he meant because the phrase had fallen out of use. New celestial presence in our system, all very polite so far, but they reactivated one of the ruins on the big moon of Fourth Sister, and they'll work out we took some of their stuff, and maybe that'll be a problem. But we've got a punchy planetary defense force these days. We'll have to see. There's a secessionist movement amongst the colonies on the Nightside continent that's gaining momentum. Aunt Vishni is negotiating right now, but we reckon we'll have to let them go their own way. It's talk and ideology right now, but in a generation's time, it'll be fighting if we try to hold on to them. Let them go, and hopefully they'll be happy trading partners, maybe even asking to rejoin us in a century's time. We can, as always, afford to be patient, and there's a nasty little movement just kicking off that wants to strip rights from the awakened, but we reckon there are basically 3 industrialists who are pushing that, and if the worst comes to worst, we have some good triggermen on world right now. Jonah considered that. That's how we do things, is it? Not if we have any option, but every time they open their mouths to their followers, a score of dogs and pigs and dolphins get hunted down and beaten. It's a weapon in our arsenal, Uncle Jonah. You want the full particulars and a seat on the board to make your voice heard. You know it's yours for the asking, if you're staying. Am I? He asked. He'd been sure he would, but so many things had changed. Perhaps the best service he could do for his extended family here was drop off his cargo and work out what distant star was calling him. There'd always be somewhere, and then, of course, the world would have moved on even further when he returned. Young Iris here would be an old woman, would be dead, would have set off on her own voyages of discovery. And then where would he be? Forever the man that made the statue of, even after people had forgotten what any of it was for. Except that curse, at least, would never be his. The whole point of the family business was to ensure the travelers were never forgotten. Someone would be waiting to talk to the returnees through what had changed, ease them back into the world. He heard a murmur, and then someone was walking past the staff to their booth, an uneven tread and a faint whir of servos that spoke of an artificial leg. He looked up, and his eyes widened. Elosia? She was older than him now, where she'd been a few years his junior growing up. But she was only a little older, not a whole generation. She grinned, teeth flashing silver in her dark face. Jonah Redclaws, I live and breathe. Look at you. 6 years and barely a day on you. For him, it had been 2. For the world around them, 3 decades since the pair of them had last stood under this gravity, in this atmosphere. He embraced her fiercely, feeling the weight of the muscle her adventures had put in her. The leg's new, he noted. Got cut by a ghost over on Humbara, she said. My engineer rigged me my mech suit so that the socket plugs right in, though. Runs better that way. You sticking around, old man? Her nickname for him, now bizarrely detached from all objective time, just as they both were. Suddenly it felt very good to have solid ground beneath his feet, a world where he was known, at least second-hand. For a while, if you are. About time I pulled my weight, put in a day at the family firm. And it wouldn't be forever, he knew. The stars would call him out there again, but sometimes it was good to slow down, let relativity catch up to you. Good, the Radiant grinned again. Let me show you around. Whew, that's all 9 chapters. Oh, gosh. Okay, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how much you like lore, we still have all this stuff. This is a timeline. It goes Exodus, Dawn Era, Remnant Era, Crucible Era, Rise of the Aslan Dynasty. So we're going from 2200 AD to 41500 AD. Holy smokes. Okay. Part 1, Exodus, 2200 AD. Fleeing a dying Earth, governments and other powerful organizations began launching fleets of ark ships out into the galaxy, seeking a new home for humanity. Within 2 centuries, Earth is completely abandoned. All that remains of humanity, our achievements, culture, and history, is aboard the ark ships, traveling at near light speed through the dark void of space. Humanity constructed a fleet of ark ships and fled the dying Earth. Traveling near light speed, these ships were capable of crossing vast distances within the span of just a few generations. They sought only one thing: to find a new home among the stars. They found a habitable galaxy in Centauri. That's a pretty big jump. Okay, we're up to 18,000 AD, the Dawn Era. Several Ark fleets reach the Centauri cluster, 16,000 light years from Earth. So itchy. They discover hundreds of densely packed star systems with thousands of potentially habitable planets and send out the Green World signal to summon the rest of the Ark ships. Knowing it'll take millennia for the Green World signal to spread across the galaxy, these first arrivals slowly colonize the Centauri cluster, eventually establishing vast interstellar societies and empires. A slow but steady trickle of Ark ships from Earth continue to arrive in Centauri, drawn by the Green World signal. The new arrivals struggle to find their place in a now unfamiliar galaxy, ultimately adapting and evolving like those before them, or perishing. Remnant Era, 24,000 AD. Centauri's early history is marked by the violent rise and fall of interstellar empires. With the aid of genetic engineering, the citizens of these constantly warring cultures rapidly change and evolve. Over thousands of years, the descendants of the original colonists splinter into dozens of divergent species. Collectively, these transhuman beings called themselves Celestials. As various celestial factions expand and vie for dominance over the Centauri cluster, entire star systems are transformed into factories that generate trillions of weapons and war machines. Violence between rival celestial empires culminates in the Formation Wars, approximately 28,000 AD, obliterating hundreds of habitable worlds across the cluster. Ark ships drawn by the green signal continued to arrive during this era, with the human inhabitants relegated to small backwater worlds by the more technologically advanced celestial factions. Timeout. So the Celestials don't all get along. Not that they were like one race, but they're multiple aliens that um, evolved from humans, I guess. I'm very itchy. I didn't realize this was going to be so far in the future. I was thinking a couple thousand years. Also, like, at what point would we come up with a new zero? Like, when would we start a new age instead of just basing it on our current system of BCE and AD? I don't know, or CE. Isn't it CE actually, not AD? Common Era, before Common Era? I don't know. It just seems like at some point we'd go, let's start over. Let's pick a new number, especially if we were in an entire new galaxy. Crucible Era, 30,000 AD. In the aftermath of the Formation Wars, a powerful celestial species called the Elohim rise to prominence. The Elohim construct the gates of heaven, an interstellar network linking all the systems of Centauri, heralding a new age of exploration and trade. As the unchallenged power in Centauri, the Elohim usher in 5,000 years of peace and prosperity. They establish unbreakable laws, including a ban on the destruction of habitable worlds, the galaxy's most precious resource. The Elohim eventually recede from the galactic stage. New celestial empires rise up to fill the void, expanding their territory and influence through diplomacy, trade, and military might. The ultimate fate of the Elohim is unknown, yet the remaining celestial empires continue to obey their laws for fear of potentially catastrophic retribution should they violate them. In addition to building the gates of heaven, the Elohim also used their hyper-advanced technology to move hundreds of habitable planets to completely new systems. Whoa. Among these was Lydon, a moon placed into close proximity orbit around a gas giant in the Malak Bell system. Rise of the Aslan dynasty, 41,500. I wonder if this is based on C.S. Lewis. A long-lost human Ark fleet arrives in the Malak Bell system and establishes a colony on the moon of Lydon, building atop ruins left behind by a long-extinct celestial civilization called the Detonir. After 2 centuries of struggling to survive, a human traveler named Orion Aslan emerges as Lydon's leader and savior. Born in 2328 LR, Lydon Reckoning by Old Earth Continuous Calendar, Orion Aslan rises from a simple mercenary to become a legendary traveler and hero on Lydon, venturing out into the space of numerous Exodus missions in search of advanced celestial technology to elevate Lydon society. Orion establishes the Aslan dynasty, a powerful network of loyal followers to rule over his homeworld during his long absence among the stars. In 2476 LR, Orion celebrates the birth of his perfect heir, June Aslan. Genetically created with both celestial and human DNA, shortly after Orion embarks on his final exodus, never to return. Gideon Aslan, June's half-brother, seizes control of the dynasty and declares himself ruler of Lydon, forcing June, still a mere child, to go into hiding. Timeout. So, it does make me think of Andromeda, because I'm guessing that old man was the main character's dad. It sounds like Gideon's sort of the Logain of this world, and June is the main character, is what I'm guessing, just from this. Oh, thank you.
We both knew the cost of using the gates.
Main trailer. Is there anything I need to read, though? Oh, God, there is. Okay, let's do this. Time dilation. Fleeing from a dying Earth via arc ships in 23rd century, our ancestors' emotional journey stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Journeying at near light speed in search of new worlds to settle, time itself slowed to a crawl. We weren't just traveling in space, but sprinting into the future. As our ancestors traversed thousands of light years, countless ships vanished into the abyss, swallowed by the vast emptiness of space. But a lucky or fateful few reached the Centauri cluster, where there were hundreds of habitable worlds, and sent out the green signal, a message calling all humanity to come join them. The other arc ships heeded the message. As we sailed on the edge of light speed, the consequences of time dilation exacted a cost. Although the trip to Centauri took only decades for those still on the arc ship, tens of thousands of years passed for the people who sent the green signal. Over this time, these early voyagers established empires and evolved into species as varied as the stars in the sky. They were barely recognizable as human, now known to us as celestials. Not only did these hyper-advanced celestials see us as primitives by the time we reached Centauri, but we were relegated to backwater worlds, isolated, ostracized, and controlled by our evolved ancestors. Our sole beacon of hope, the travelers. Courageous explorers who journey the stars, unearthing ancient and powerful technologies on the dead worlds of extinct celestial civilizations. For the life of a traveler, time becomes your enemy, a force you cannot see or escape, a concept distorted by the unfathomable speeds at which you traverse through space. What may seem like mere hours or days to you can equate to years, even decades passing for those you leave behind. With each exodus, you are confronted not only by the dangers that lie waiting for you across the universe, but also the emotional toll of your absence on those you love. Each choice you make while you are traveling on your interstellar missions is magnified by the reality of time dilation, and the cost and consequences are often paid by your entire civilization and the friends and family you leave behind. At the center of each Exodus mission lies the Pathways, an interstellar transportation network accessed only via the Gates of Heaven, massive artifacts constructed and maintained by mysterious, hyper-advanced beings called the Elohim. The Gates of Heaven are a technological marvel that enables us to explore worlds beyond the reach of conventional spacecraft. Yet, amidst the dangers and immense toll your journeys extract, a sense of purpose exists that propels you and your companions further into the unknown. The celestial artifacts that you are searching for hold the power of both creation and destruction. Uncovering just one of them could completely change the course of an entire civilization. Over the passing millennia, you will observe the immense impact that your choices have on your descendants, your world, and humanity as a whole. That's the price you pay for being a traveler. The Traveler's Creed. We sail on the edge of light speed where time moves differently. As each day goes by, years pass for those we leave behind. Our service, our sacrifice, discovers words, seeds hope, breaks empires. We are the travelers. I am so hot. Okay, we just got 5 more to go. The tiny blue marble. If my calculations are correct, today would have been a holiday known as Earth Day back on the planet of our origin. In light of this occasion, I'd like to draw your attention to one of our museum's lesser known but highly treasured exhibits, a diary excerpt from a young teacher dated the late 21st century. Today, my class took a field trip to the woods on the outskirts of town, where we planted trees in honor of the day we celebrate this tiny blue marvel we all call home. The children enjoyed being outside. Luckily, the pollution levels were low, so the kids with asthma didn't need their breathers. I don't know if they truly understood the message of Earth Day, but it's important to start trying to reach them when they're young. Despite climbing CO2 emissions and rising temperature and microplastics contaminating our oceans, they need to know that there is still hope for humanity's future. Seeing the pure joy on their faces as they dug in the fresh dirt and planted their tiny saplings gave me hope too. It's not too late. We can still change things for the better. We can still save Earth. I truly believe that. I have to. What other option is there? Abandon this planet that gave birth to us? Hurl ourselves out into the cold darkness of space and pray we find something half as precious as what we already have? I can't even imagine the misery of suffering such a future might entail. Hopefully, we never have to find out. The ultimate fate of the author is unknown. Even if she lived to see the era of the Ark fleets, she would have been too old to be selected for the journey. But her simple words echo powerfully across the millennia. Our ancestors didn't appreciate what they had until it was too late. Earth was lost, our home forever destroyed by our own hubris, avarice, and apathy. Those of us who study history know it often repeats itself. Is our home of Lydon doomed to head down the same path as Earth? Are we blind to the lessons of the past? If you look closely, there are already signs of potential trouble. Will we heed the warning before it's too late, or will we too lose this world we have been blessed with? No, I don't want cookies. Silicates. To say the arrival of humanity in the Centauri cluster was not easy is a dramatic understatement. We faced unknown challenges and deadly enemies, spread across thousands of planets and hundreds of systems. Against these overwhelming odds, humanity's focus was on survival. Fortunately, our ancestors who made it to Centauri were experts in survival. After traveling for generations across thousands of light years aboard the Ark ships fleeing a dying Earth, they were not about to back down from any fight. In Centauri, we encountered harsh, uninhabitable landscapes and regions controlled by creatures that had no intention of sharing their living space with humans. Many of these quote unquote aliens were recognizable as distant relatives of terrestrial animals that had evolved and adapted to their new surroundings. Others were beings genetically engineered to thrive in the most extreme conditions, monsters resembling the things that crawl through the dark corners of our worst cryosleep nightmares. However, the greatest threat to our survival was, and always will be, the Celestials themselves. Descended from the first settlers from Earth to reach Centauri, these ancient beings have shed the last vestiges of their humanity and evolved into something unrecognizable and terrifying. With technological advancements far eclipsing our own, we found ourselves exposed at their mercy. This vulnerability gave rise to the Travelers, heroic explorers who dare to stand as champions of humanity across the cluster. In their journeys to the distant stars, they seek out relics and remnants from lost celestial civilizations to use in our never-ending battle for survival. But they also found something else, something the Celestials hadn't discovered: silicates. Nobody knows exactly what ancient culture gave rise to the silicates. The true origins of the silicates remain a mystery even to this day. We do not know if they were created by a long forgotten civilization or if they are the true alien, quote unquote, life that evolved independently in Centauri, or perhaps elsewhere. For celestials, silicate eggs, quote unquote, appear as rare but simple crystals or gems with no power or significance. Only with the touch of a human does the symbiotic bond awaken, allowing the silicate to hatch and merge with human flesh. For most, this merger is fatal, but for a precious few, it is transcendent. Once a human bonds with a silicate, their transformation is radical and permanent. As the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The symbiotic union of humans and silicates creates a new being known as a daemon. The individual skin changes, becoming translucent Becoming translucent but virtually impervious, their musculature evolves, giving them incredible speed, strength, and other physical abilities. They become something greater, something even the celestial sphere. Silicates are humanity's leverage. Daemons don't need weapons, they are weapons. They give humanity a fighting chance against the Celestials. They even the playing field. Since silicates will only bond with humans, there are some who see them as in a religious light. They believe human silicate coexistence was preordained. It was meant to be and brought to fruition by some higher power. Others see it as a fortunate break for humanity, a piece of good luck to offset all the hardships we have endured. However, silicates are not without their drawbacks. Daemons are prone to intrusive, violent thoughts and urges. Some theorize the silicates are Some theorize the silicates are speaking to their host through these dark musings, influencing and changing their behavior to suit their own dark purpose. Others feel the silicates merely allow daemons to tap into the primal shadow that exists within all humanity, buried beneath a veneer of civilization and manners. But whatever reservations humanity may have about the silicates and daemons, one thing is certain: the Celestials fear them far more than we do. That alone validates their true value to our cause. Time out. To me, that sounds something like Blue Beetle or Venom, right? It also kind of sounds like Sam from Andromeda just a little bit. Oh no, what just happened? Well, I already read this, didn't I? Oh no, I read this one. Okay. Okay. Travelers, humanity's eternal warriors. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The loud echo of the steel door closing on your ship, the silence that grips your heart as you depart, and with each and every star you pass, a subtle reminder that time is ticking away back home. Becoming a traveler is no small feat. There is no training program to ease the transition into a lonely and isolating life that comes to surround you like a skin you cannot shed. The act of balancing the known threats looming over your homeworld versus the unknown dangers you will face on your mission is the first trial you have to conquer. Everything else is just a table stakes, as we used to say back on Earth. Nothing you have experienced up to this point can prepare you for the perils that await you, but you know that. That's why you became a traveler. The fear of losing everything, even our very lives, is not daunting enough to deter us from our goal, ensuring the survival of our species. What defines us, we believe in the value of our inheritance and the promise of our heritage. The belief that we will survive and triumph is in our DNA. It is the most powerful weapon we have against our celestial adversaries. We have not lost that spirit that empowers us to confront the unthinkable and believe we can prevail. Humans share an undying faith that we are meant to be. History has taught us to stand firm in the presence of evil and tap our inner strength, to harness our faith in humanity as the power to fuel our actions. This bond unites us in our commitment to humanity's survival, to our salvation. Against the Celestials, it is our secret weapon. Well, one of them, anyway. We hardly think about the fact that surviving an exodus is a near miracle. On the surface, we are all ill equipped to battle such insurmountable power and live to tell our tales. But what we lack in physical strength or technology, we compensate for with courage, conviction, and commitment. We leverage our hearts against their intelligence. We use our instinct to fight their intentionality and our inspiration to outwit their innovation. Our mission is spiritual, a commitment to humanity's salvation. Their goal is practical, based on the logic that they were here millennia ahead of us and have evolved well beyond us. They do not need us or want us. We are but a grim reminder of a past they have chosen to forget. But does superiority trump spirituality? Does it? Travelers are a rare breed, committed to challenging an enemy whose intelligence vastly outstrips our own. The Celestials, once our equals, 40,000 years ago, are now highly advanced beings with superior technology, ingenuity, and therefore great power. To the Celestials, we are relics of a past they have discarded, useless and worse, a threat to their continued existence and dominance. They see us as a passing infestation that they must eradicate. To us, they represent what happens when you sacrifice your humanity to the altar of technology. We fight to shift the balance in our favor, hoping to create a new civilization that is wiser, more compassionate, and more connected. Hailing, hailing from the disparate homeworlds, all travelers are bound by the first principles. Quote, assume nothing, question everything. End quote. Hey, they could hang out with Ezio. The philosophy is vital to maintaining our sanity in a universe where so many of humanity's beliefs are challenged or discarded or deemed irrelevant. Separated by our travels and spread across distant stars, it is not often that we have the chance to connect with our comrades. But we are allied, united by our shared faith in humanity. We know they are out there fighting with us. Our common bond is that we can never escape the real enemy, time dilation. While we spend mere weeks on a mission, years slip away at home. Time stretches and warps, reshaping our homeworld and forcing unforeseen changes on loved ones left behind. Ties to our homes grow tenuous, our relationships are tested, and the heartache of separation from all that we hold dear is a constant companion on every mission. In the endless stretch of space, the silence is deafening, giving our nightmares free rein. Most heart-wrenching of all is when we return to find our homeworld pillaged or destroyed. The horrors that strike in our absence dull whatever successes we achieve, be they hard-won relics, tech, or insights. Though outwardly we appear unchanged, our souls carry indelible scars. The life of a traveler is a heroic pursuit of survival and spirituality fueled by skill and grit, something no longer present in our technologically advanced descendants. It's less about braving the unknown and more about the defiance that comes from a bold heart and resolute spirit. We are humanity's eternal warriors, traversing time and space to face the unexpected and capture the unimaginable. We are the explorers, treasure hunters, archaeologists, scientists, and engineers, the pathfinders, who are always pushing the barriers and battling the obstacles that block the way to a better future. We are the mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, friends and lovers. We don't know any better than to overcome. That is our heritage, the same legacy that follows us from Earth, where we escaped extinction. We did not come this far to go quietly. For each of us, every Exodus mission is a leap into the abyss. The only thing we can be sure of is that the days for us are decades back home. Time dilation is a blessing and a curse. Every minute we lose with our loved one, every tear we shed upon our return is part of our story and a reminder of our humanity. Every decision is made in service to ending the sacrifices we make to time. We are the frontline fighters in humanity's final battle, survival versus extinction. We are humanity's last hope. When you think back on our history as a species, we have survived political upheavals, cultural revolutions, and world wars. Who knows? Perhaps one day we will have our day of independence, a day to celebrate and honor the timeless sacrifices we travelers make for humanity's future. And that, my child, is what it means to be a traveler. We exist outside of time. It is a price we pay. One day, I hope our story will be etched into the history books of Centauri. Good grief. 3 more to go. Okay, we can do this. The Elohim. The centuries-long formation wars were the most violent, chaotic, and destructive era in Centauri's history. Hundreds, possibly thousands of habitable worlds were destroyed as the celestial dominions battled each other for control of the cluster. Billions of lives were lost, entire civilizations were wiped out. But from the ashes of this devastating conflict arose the Elohim, the most powerful and technologically advanced beings in the galaxy. Most of what we know about the Elohim, that's how I'm going to say it from now on. Elohim is speculation based on myths and legends, but even now, more than 15,000 years later, their influence still shapes and defines Centauri. Celestials and humans alike are bound by the laws of the Elohim, a small but inviolable collection of fundamental rules, treaties, and agreements meant to prevent the atrocities of the Formation Wars from ever happening again. As important as the laws are, however, they pale in comparison to the other great achievement of the Elohim, the Gates of Heaven, a network of pathways linking all the various systems of the cluster. Before the gates, interstellar journeys were dangerously unpredictable and prohibitively expensive and inefficient. Travel and trade between systems was limited and unreliable. The celestial dominions were isolated enclaves with little communication or interaction with each other, one of the primary factors that contributed to the brutality of the Formation Wars. The Gates of Heaven changed everything. Though still bound by the speed of light, ships are now able to navigate the vast ocean of space across the cluster using established charts and automated navigational calculations. Even more crucial, the gates allow for rapid acceleration to and deceleration from light speed, significantly reducing the length of time spent on each journey. Interstellar trade and travel has flourished, becoming a cornerstone of every celestial dominion and human inhabited world. The Elohim are universally revered across Centauri, even by the Celestials. Without the gates, the travelers themselves could not exist. Exodus would be virtually impossible. The risk and uncertainties of launching blindly into the void of space would be too great for even the bravest explorers. Whether they meant to or not, the Elohim gave our kind a fighting chance. Mysteriously, after creating the miracle of the gates, the Elohim vanished from the galactic record. Some believe they ascended to a state of pure energy, shedding their corporeal shells. Others claim they left Centauri to explore the farthest corners of the galaxy. Perhaps they are still present among us, using advanced technology to hide their presence from lesser beings. Or maybe they suffered the inevitable fate of all empires and collapsed into extinction thousands of years ago. But though the Elohim are seemingly gone, their power and authority remains. Those who dare violate the laws suddenly find their ships no longer able to access the gates of heaven, the ultimate punishment. Cut off from interstellar trade, economies collapse, scientific advancement is stunted, existing technology begins to degrade as resources become scarce. Depending on the crime, the isolation can last anywhere from a few years to a few centuries, a crippling blow to any society, if it even survives. And what of the Elohim themselves? Were they truly the selfless, altruistic, godlike beings the legends contend? Were the gates not a gift, but rather a way to establish dominance and control access across the entire cluster? Are the Elohim still here, watching events unfold from some secret hiding place and administering justice to those who defy their will? Or are the gates controlled by the ghost of some ancient artificial intelligence? If they are still here, what do they think of humanity and our struggle to rise up and find our place alongside the Celestials? We may never know the truth, but for now, the Elohim seem to tolerate us, at least as long as we play by their rules. All right, 2 to go. Celestial remnants. Man, my throat hurts. When the first Ark ships arrived in Centauri, they discovered a blank canvas. Hundreds of densely packed star systems hosting thousands of empty but habitable Eden worlds. Over the next 20,000 years, the early settlers spread across the cluster. Empires rose and fell. Technology advanced. Human colonists evolved and changed until they became what we now call Celestials, being so far removed from their earthly origins that it's hard to remember we were once all the same. There are still Ark ships arriving in the cluster, vessels launched from Earth long ago that became lost in the vast oceans of space. Somehow we survived and made it here, just as our predecessors did millennia ago, but the blank canvas is no more. The celestial dominions control vast swaths of Centauri, and they despise us. They look down on us as primitive, lesser beings. They mock us for what we don't understand, but in their arrogance, they refuse to acknowledge that they too are ignorant. Greatest celestial dominions of this age, like the Crown, are mere shadows of the sprawling empires that came before. Centauri is a graveyard of countless civilizations, their secrets and achievements long buried and forgotten. But the glorious creations of these ancients are still out there somewhere, just waiting to be discovered. This is the true purpose of the travelers, the one hope humanity has of surviving against a far superior enemy. We must seek out the lost marvels and treasures of the past, these remnants and use them to level the playing field. By combining advanced technology and weapons with human resourcefulness and ingenuity, we will give ourselves a fighting chance. We will steal fire from the gods and use it to raise ourselves up to their level. But such missions are fraught with danger and peril. Travelers exploring the ruins of long extinct civilizations are as likely to find nightmares as miracles, and any remnant powerful enough to save us also has the power to wipe us out. Such was the fate of many ancient celestial civilizations like the Detonir, who once ruled our homeworld of Lydon. The Detonir vanished suddenly and without explanation. In the pursuit of greater advancements, what horrors did they accidentally unleash upon themselves? Remnants are a double edged sword. If that sword was created using science and technology 10,000 years more advanced than their own. But even if we can't understand how a remnant was made, we can often figure out a way it can be used. We can adapt, modify, and build on the remnants to advance our own society, taking us down unexpected new paths and unlocking branches of scientific discovery we didn't even know existed. Take the fearsome Apocalypse Titans, massive, automated war machines used to decimate entire planets during the Formation Wars. The Titans went into hibernation 15,000 years ago, vanishing beneath the surface of the planets they ravaged. Unearthing one of these slumbering giants on an abandoned world can change the course of an entire planet. The knowledge gained from studying its weaponry and construction could revolutionize both war and industry. And finding a way to actually wake the slumbering titan could give humanity a guardian even celestials would fear, assuming we don't unleash a monster that would obliterate us all. This is the knife's edge travelers live on. Sometimes our reach exceeds our grasp, and the consequences of what we discover are tragic and deadly. Many travelers have given their lives searching for remnants. Many more perish by daring to use remnants they found. But the risk is worth the reward. Remnants allow humanity to advance in great leaps and bounds, instead of crawling slowly forward, forever trailing the Celestials. But those treasures are not the only reminders of the civilizations that once were. On virtually every world travelers explore, we encounter ghosts, mechanical constructs built by the Celestials to function as servants, laborers, guardians, and soldiers. The Celestial mass produced these constructs by the trillions, often unleashing them in massive numbers against enemy worlds. Though they are not sentient, lacking self awareness and complex thought, ghosts operate with the precision of intelligent soldiers. They adapt to enemy tactics, organize into coordinated units, and follow simple orders with deadly efficiency. Built from corrosion resistant alloys and powered by fusion, they can lie dormant for thousands of years, only to reawaken with minor software glitches and mechanical stutters. Celestials still employ these ghosts across the cluster, remnants of a time when war was waged on a scale we can scarcely imagine. With every exodus, travelers make a leap of faith, throwing ourselves into the unknown, braving the dangers of the ancient past to try and secure humanity's future. Used properly, the remnants can be our hope, our salvation. Used carelessly, they could be the cause of our extinction. This is the burden all travelers bear. Our decisions ripple through time and across generations. Our actions will irrevocably change the course of humanity. What future will you create for our world? What path will you lead humanity down? Salvation? Extinction? Ultimately, this is the only question that matters. Our fate is in your hands, traveler. The choice is yours. Timeout. I'm betting we get a ghost on our team, and they're totally going to be like HK. And that's going to be awesome. All right, guys. It's 12:18 is the no no 12:19 is the date. So this is only up to date to this day. But we're on our last thing to read for the day, and then I can drink something and not talk for the rest of the day because my throat hurts. It's so dry. Okay, here we go. Archimedes' engine. Humanity's long and arduous journey to the Centauri cluster began 40,000 years ago. Fleeing a dying Earth, they set out in search of habitable planets and a new beginning. Upon arrival in Centauri, they discovered dozens of densely packed star systems teeming with Eden worlds, brimming with life. These planets became the heart of interstellar civilization, the foundation from which the entire cluster would eventually evolve. As the first human settlements took root, they faced immeasurable challenges in this new universe. Slowly, they transformed over thousands of years, diverging from what we once knew as humanity into the earliest celestial dominions, powerful alien beings with abilities, intelligence far beyond our understanding. As the dominions of the first wave continued to expand their territory and arc ships continued to arrive, competition for Eden worlds grew fierce. The wars that followed were cataclysmic, fought with weapons so powerful that they sometimes devastated the very planets they sought to claim. The entire worlds were reduced to ashes in pursuit of dominance until finally they brought the cluster to the brink of annihilation. In the aftermath of the brutal formation wars during what became known as the Remnant Era, a technological marvel emerged, the Archimedes engine. This incredible invention reshaped the very architecture of the galaxy. By enabling the movement of entire planets within a star system, repositioning them into life-sustaining Goldilocks habitable zones, the engine stabilized orbits, controlling atmospheres, and terraformed barren worlds into new Eden worlds. The Archimedes engine fueled a population explosion across the cluster. Where once there were dozens of habitable worlds, now there were thousands. The celestial dominions expanded their empires, creating vast networks of colony worlds. Later waves of human arc ships arriving after the worlds found untouched Eden worlds waiting for them. As they acclimated to this thriving but volatile region of space, they had to adapt and evolve like their celestial overlords or risk extinction. But the miracle of the Archimedes engine was not without its flaws. Nothing lasts forever, and one of these ancient machines begins to fail, usually after thousands of years. The consequences are catastrophic. A world supported by a failing engine can spiral into an uninhabitable hellscape within a single generation. Entire civilizations, cities, towns, millions of lives can be wiped out almost overnight. Due to the incredible complexity of their design, repairing a failing Archimedes engine is nearly impossible. The celestial civilization that created them went extinct 10,000 years ago, taking much of their knowledge with them. Now, when a world begins to die, its inhabitants have only one choice: struggle to survive as conditions worsen, before finally abandoning their home and becoming refugees in a cold, unforgiving galaxy. This extraordinary planet-moving relic still powers numerous celestial bodies in their current orbits, including our own homeworld of Lydon, a moon precisely positioned in close proximity to the gas giant Galeras in the Malak Bell system. However, the unthinkable is happening. A technological virus known as the Rot is slowly degrading all our advanced technology, including the critical machines we depend on for survival. Even the planetary engines, which were once our lifeblood, are beginning to fail, threatening the future of everything that we've built and every one we hold dear. Seeing the impending disaster, legendary travelers like Orion Aslan embarked on the Exodus missions to save Lydon. The solution, though obvious, seemed impossible: repair the engines. Whew. Now, as June Aslan and Orion's heir, you stand at the culmination of a decades-long dynastic effort to save our world. You are Lydon's last hope, a lone spark in the darkness of a dying planet. But the journey ahead is fraught with peril. Enemies from all sides, driven by their own desires and fears, are determined to thwart your mission to driven by their own desires and fears, are determined to thwart your mission to secure humanity's salvation. Traveler, the fate of Lydon depends on you. Can you overcome the challenges you face, unlock the secrets of the Archimedes engine, and save our home? Or is our planet doomed to repeat the tragic errors of Earth, becoming just another casualty in the long and brutal history of the Centauri cluster? With the power to shape worlds in your hands, what path will you take? Finger guns. We're done. We're done. We read them all. I don't know how many words that was, but it was too many words for me. So I'm going to call it there. I'm not even going to give my thoughts and stuff. I got to go. So thanks for watching. I'd appreciate it if you guys left an offering for the algorithm on your way out. It feeds on likes. It thirsts for subscribers. It breathes, right? Breathes notification bells. What does it do for comments? I don't know. The algorithm likes comments, so leave a comment. And as always, remember to be excellent to each other and party on.